It is the European VC. It is the 12th of November. It is the evening at time of recording. We have a packed episode. We're going to look all across Europe, AI, big tech, small tech, what's happening in regulation, what's happening in governments, what's happening at COP29. So let's kick off, Mads. First up, a little bit of lighter news, kind of avoiding this hAIpy nonsense. A number of reports out of the real revenue being generated by AI startups. And I found it fascinating that the average time for an AI startup to hit $1 million in revenue is 11 months compared to SaaS at 15 months. Now, Cursor grew from 4 million ARR to 4 million MRR in less than 12 months. So there's a lot of amazing stuff happening in real money, not hypey nonsense, in AI.
So that's from $4 million a year to $48 million a year run rate revenue.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
This is not messing around. And
Nope.
And OpenAI are now doing nearly $4 billion in revenue. This is proper not.com, not crazy hypey stuff. Of course, there's going to be some hype and there's going to be some noise and nonsense, but it's lovely to see the reports coming through about how this real impact is happening, which I think is super bloody cool. Next up, COP29. This is a bit of a contentious one because who doesn't want a sustainable planet for their kids? Yet none of the bigwigs have turned up this year to COP29. So Xi Jinping, Joe Biden, Putin, Russia, none of them are at COP29. So none of the biggest oil producing countries. And some of the other smaller countries are boycotting, talking about it all being greenwashing. And Starmer has set even more aggressive targets for the UK to hit new emissions targets, which are now 81% cut by 2035. So anything more, apart from the newsy aspect, anything more that you wanted to dig in on this bit?
No, I think it's interesting that we've been talking for many years about the challenge that is climate change. We know it's incredibly important to solve it, not just because changed temperatures, changed climate has biodiversity impacts, but also changes the planet we live on for us as humans here. Kind of we have more adverse weather. We have all these second and third order impact to food production and everything else with it. So it's something we have to take seriously. And I think there's just been a sense that, these conference of the parties, kind of these big UN structures to some extent are talking shops where not necessarily a lot of important things get decided. And so the important people stay away. And of course, that means the whole thing falls apart in terms of its ability to affect any meaningful change. So I think if there's any takeaway from this, it is that, we have to have leadership in the UK, in Europe, in partnership with our allies. We cannot wait for some global UN organization to solve this for us because right now it just seems pretty defunct.
Yeah, it's a lot of word salad. Something that is not word salad and was absolute music to our ears was Ursula von der Leyen talking about the new EU startup passport. I know the EU Inc. chaps have been pushing hard on this agenda, and it was announced this week, and it's a really, really bloody cool thing. What's happening here?
It's a super, super cool thing. So it's this notion of what's called the 28th regime. Since the UK left, there's been 27 member states in the EU. And the way EU laws work, they're called directives, is that they're proposed by the European Commission, and then they're modified and agreed by the European Parliament and the European member states. And once EU directives are agreed, then they need to be implemented in national laws. And the member states, they have some latitude over how this is done. And it's not always done uniformly. And therefore today, even when you have, kind of single market EU directives that are trying to converge laws and make it simpler to do business, you still often end up with slightly different interpretations of these laws in local countries. And companies that operate in multiple countries then need to follow the local laws in the country where they operate. This is quite easy if you're a big company, like a big automotive player, or if you're Google, you've got legal teams that can take care of that for you. But if you're a smaller startup and you want to do business, you've got big ambitions, then it's really hard to figure out how these 27 legislative frameworks they work. And therefore, many companies end up focusing on the US because, yes, of course, you have different rules and regulations in different U.S. states, but you still have a joint commerce framework. In the U.S., kind of there's this very important a rule that commerce in general is a federal, federally regulated, right? So you have kind of one set of rules you can use. So the idea that's now getting speed in Europe is that there should be a new 28th regime. So a set of laws that sit outside of the 27 member states, and where startups can say, well, actually, we want to follow this simplified set of rules that will be uniform and that we can use everywhere we go. And so Ursula, she's been confirming that this is being put into place, which will basically create this new set of laws around how businesses operate, including patents. And it's effectively the next iteration of the single market idea. So it's very, very exciting. Michael McGrath, he's will lead the implementation of this. Personally, I would say it would be so great to have the UK in the mix to help drive kind of the most ambitious platform.
One day.
Yeah, and a kind of framework for growth. Who knows? Maybe we can opt in, right? Maybe we can get a special permission to join the 28th.
Do you know anything on that? Would that be even possible? Do you know anything on that count?
Everything's possible. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Well,
right now,
maybe it could be the 29th. Maybe we could sneak in just after the 28th.
There you go. Today we're watching from the sidelines, right? But I'm still very excited that it's getting done.
Yeah, that's awesome. Staying in Europe, Germany's in the doldrums, so the German government has collapsed. What's cooking?
So there has been a fight between the different parties in this coalition government they've had. Kind of the Liberals and the Social Democrats have been at odds. Chancellor Scholz from the Social Democrats, he wanted to increase support to Ukraine, especially in the context of Trump winning the US election. The finance minister, Christian Lindner from the Liberals, he basically demanded that there was a reform of other government affairs before additional funds could be found, and so they couldn't agree, and so the coalition has collapsed. It's a difficult thing for Germany. It's not good when governments collapse. It's better when they govern well and do good things. It's possibly a good thing for Europe. It could pave way for more European reform. The German government coalition had a sort of reputation for being a little bit dysfunctional, and possibly that's held back some of the kind of bigger reformist things that needed to happen around energy, around trade dynamics, around kind of just improving various structural things. The problem Germany has had, and one of the reasons why they've had this big fight over the economy, is that the German economy hasn't grown for basically since 2019, since before COVID. It's absolutely flat. And so the UK, it's not that we are a shining star here. It's kind of we sort of about 3% up in that period. The US being on top of the leaderboard with more than 10% growth to the total economy in that period. But other Eurozone economies have grown. So Italy, France have both grown faster than the UK, and Germany is at zero. And we just know that if you have an economy that's completely stagnant for 5 years, that makes managing your fiscal position super hard because everybody needs more, right? Hospitals need more, healthcare, schools. You always need more resource, sometimes even just to stand still. And so with a flat economy, that becomes difficult. So that's collapsed. Hopefully now it can lead to a new and more stable government that can help not only fix the German economy so they can start growing again and help pull Europe with them, but also support some of the European reform we need around both the fiscal framework and also defense, which I think is very important.
Yeah, because there's such a massive engine at the center of Europe. So that's going to be...
Correct.
Let's hope back on track. Let's hope mummy and daddy make up and they get back on track and start making some money and some nice cars. Thank you very much. Shooting over to Google, a very quick one, but I thought it was super interesting. AI is now writing over 25% of code at Google. Now, my immediate question was, how far can they go? Could this go 75, 95? Is it going to be AI writing AI? What? Do you know anything more on this, or should we move on quickly?
No, I think it shows the direction of travel. I don't know if anybody knows whether we're going to get to 75 or 95%. I don't think we're going to get to 100% in the near term. So I think there will be human creativity. It'll be part of the mix, a very important part of the mix. But in terms of the productivity, it's just accelerating tremendously.
Yeah. And we're gonna talk about the report in a minute, the MIT report and that whole co-piloting and what's happening there, because that's just another great example. Another very, very quick one at Google, just staying very quickly, and we'll fly past it. But Google confirms that Jarvis AI is real by accidentally leaking it, which I thought was also kind of cool this week. So take a look for that if you haven't seen it. let's dig into this MIT report a little bit, because there's been a new report by Aidan Toner Rogers from MIT titled "The Artificial Intelligence, Scientific Discovery and Product Innovation." What is happening here? Because I've read this and I've seen some of the outputs of this, and it's bloody cool. But what's cooking? Tell me.
It is super cool. I mean, it's the slightly esoteric world of new materials discovery, kind of material science. And what does that mean? Well, effectively, there are scientists that are looking for new chemical structures and compounds we can use in our world, in industrial processes and, in pharmaceutical, processes and kind of in different things that we do and that we make. And so this is kind of the stuff real scientists, they do. They come up with ideas for compounds, they try to make them, they process them, and then see whether they work, whether they have a beneficial effect.
But this is materials, but this could be anything. This could be proteins, this could be drugs, this could be anything, any comparable that works in a similar way. This could be anything, right? Not just materials discovery.
Yeah, so I think this was specifically about materials. You're absolutely right, but I think many of the analogies will apply elsewhere. And what happened in this study here is basically they were showing how you can use AI to automate idea generation, which allows scientists to focus on evaluating and testing the ideas that are developed by the AI. So top researchers can leverage this AI, and that means that they could dramatically increase their productive output. So the AI-assisted scientists, they saw a 44% increase in the rate of materials discoveries, 39% more patent filings, and 17% more product prototypes come out during the period of the study. So lots more novel compounds. And why is this important? Well, it's because new materials, they really hold the potential to address many of the challenges we face. We spoke about COP29 before. A lot of that will be about energy, not just energy generation, but also energy storage. That's down to battery technology. And battery technology, well, that's really a material science.
Yeah, a lot to do in there.
So this is really, really important, and this is just a great example of how AI can help us all as humanity find more great, almost sci-fi-like materials faster. But there was one big thing, one interesting psychological thing coming out of the study, sort of around job satisfaction. I don't know whether you want to pick that one up and comment on that.
Well, I was reading on the final report, which was that they basically asked the scientists after using these AI tools where they were on a scale of 0 to 10 on an agreement level around questions like AI will make scientists in my field more productive. And that shifted from a 4 to nearly an 8. Are you worried that you're going to be replaced by AI? That was kind of in the middle at this kind of 5. AI will change the skills needed to succeed in my field. It's like before the study, it was a 2, and then that shifted up to nearly a 6. I plan to reskill in order to collaborate with AI. It was like almost a 0 before and is now up in the 3s. So there was a lot of very positive feedback to how these scientists were working with these AI toolkits to then do their job, which, as we've already mentioned, I just think applies to so many fields, this kind of co-piloting aspect.
But there was an interesting thing that came up around job satisfaction, where many scientists basically came back and said, look, the AI is now doing a lot of stuff I thought I was trained to do. AI can do it better than I can. And there was some concern that people felt they were no longer doing the thing they were trained to do.
Yeah.
And it's sort of just, it's thought provoking, right? We will have to learn new ways of working because it's not the same and it's not going back.
Yeah. And I think as it becomes more, my sense is, as it becomes more of a standard working pattern to use these AI toolkits, which we are all already using in our daily lives, whether we know it or not, to consciously be using these AI co-piloting products to accelerate our working, I think that will just become part of the natural standard for scientists and for all of us mere mortals. I know that that's going to happen. Now, we spoke last week about, obviously, the American election. Who wasn't speaking about the American election? And we recorded the last episode just before the results. And, I was wildly wrong, I have to admit. But I wanted us to talk about, on a global level.
I think maybe we were both.
Where's your head?
Wrong. Yeah, maybe there's a bit of a mea culpa here because I thought the election would be closer. I thought
I
Trump
thought it was
would
going to
win.
be so much tighter. I thought,
I thought it would
do
be
you know what? This
closer.
has got to be tight. Yeah.
But then I guess the polls were largely wrong, right? It was more of a resounding Trump victory than I think.
But
most
here's a
pollsters
question
had
for
expected.
you. Do you believe that the polls were 50-50 because they wanted that? They wanted that competitive. They didn't want to put their, out on a limb and say it's going to be, a landslide. Although, reading some of the swing state results, and I don't know if this is true, so please take with a bucket of salt, but it looks like the amount of votes across the swing states wasn't a massive, decisive Trump victory. There was quite a tight margin in swing state votes that made it look like a mega Trump landslide. I'm going to look more into that. But do you think that the polls were purposefully 50-50ing? Do you think there's any truth in that, or is that just conspiracy nonsense?
Look, there is always conspiracy, speculation around. I
Yeah.
don't know. The Americans like this stuff, right? There's no action without a conspiracy.
Otherwise, the pollsters just need to give up because they're just always so wildly wrong. It's like, what's the point? Why do we get carried away with these polls?
Yeah, I think Donald Trump, he won Pennsylvania with sort of about 135,000 votes,
Okay,
which
that's quite
isn't
decisive.
that close compared to where it's been in previous years when it was literally sort of 10,000 votes separating them.
Well, he gained ground in every single voter demographic. Identity politics is obviously dead. I mean, all of the identity stuff and the left wokist agenda that even I know Kamala was like distancing herself from, but that's obviously just so dead. I did
thank
read
God.
somewhere.
Right? We can
Well,
get back to
I
talking
think
about the
that's right.
issues.
I think that's so right because that's what the like or loathe or love or hate or whatever. That's what the American electorate have said. It's like, nah, I'm not interested in transgender issues. Just give me real meat and potatoes on the economy. Make my gas prices cheaper. Make my groceries cheaper. Talk about immigration or whatever it is. But so the big picture piece is, what does a Trump administration mean globally for the economy? And then for us, obviously, what is going to happen across Europe and in the UK? Are there going to be tariffs across Europe and in the UK? Is it going to be ultimately inflationary? Is it going to be this massive swathe of business as usual or business booming and Bitcoin booming to then see some kind of crash on the other side? Will he resolve conflict or stoke more conflict? How will that affect our economy and our startup ecosystem? And which sectors are going to be the winners and losers? I mean, the obvious one is anything in defense or anything in onshoring or productivity, I imagine, will be in the win bucket. But who's going to lose? Maybe everything in green, maybe everything in climate is going to be off the table as people focus on just the money. Where did you want to start? Massive topic. Where did you want to start? Let's look at the Trump global piece. Where's that?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at some of the specifics. Kind of the election campaign was around tariffs and tax cuts and then migration, right? Removing immigrants.
Yeah, mass deportation.
Yeah, these things, I think, by and large, seem to play well with the electorate. The question is what he will do once in power. It's a good old saying, right? You campaign in poetry and you govern in prose, and hopefully, sort of cooler heads will prevail. Hopefully, he won't implement the full kind of list of policies he proposed.
Who has he proposed as Secretary of State? Because I saw his comment yesterday, I think, saying anybody from the Democrats who's talking about getting in the way of mass deportation, get out of our way, or whatever the quote was. So it sounds like this is going to become policy.
Yeah, you've also seen J.D. Vance, as vice president, say the opposite, basically, right?
Really?
When asked about,
that.
how would you deport 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 million people, and where he sort of, really downplayed that and said, listen, that's not how you do it. You start somewhere else.
Right.
And I think they will do something, but I don't think they will go all the way. It will be so damaging to the economy.
It's so
and at the end of the day,
right?
Yeah, well, there's the expense of doing. So leave aside kind of the terrible human implications, right? Just think about the economy. He got elected on trying to restore, bring down inflation, restore the purchasing power of the dollar, kind of make sure that things aren't too expensive. The last thing he's going to do, I think, is do something that completely would tank the economy. And this would just push up the inflation to a very high degree. So I doubt that he will go all the way on migration. I do think they'll finish the wall. I do think they'll take some steps.
Do you?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I do think so.
Interesting.
I do think they'll take steps.
I've got no doubts that they will absolutely focus on the southern border. That I've got no doubt.
Yeah. And then there's tariffs, right, which is the other biggie, which we'll come back to in a minute. But I mean, if we try and rate and rank some of the other aspects, what are some of the positives that might come out of this? Firstly, I think it's going to become a lot easier to do M&A. I think you've had a certain regime here with Lina Khan, and I just think she's obviously going to be replaced, and I think all of that is going to go away. And
do you think Jerome Powell will be replaced? Do you think he'll find a way to do it? Really?
Not out of sequence. No, I don't think so. I don't think so, and I don't think there's a need to do it. A lot of the fight he had with Jerome Powell was campaign rhetoric.
I don't know where the depth is. It feels like it's. I mean, I saw the interview with Jerome Powell saying, can you be replaced? And he said, no, I can't be fired. But
So I think it'll be easier to do deals. I think they will go very, very light touch on AI. I don't think they're going to put much regulation in at all. I think they're going to put a boost around private R&D spending. I think they're going to reintroduce the full expensing of R&D expenditure, meaning you can expense it fully upfront. It used to be like that. The Democrats have changed that. I think they're going to roll that back. Maybe a minus around federal R&D spending. Maybe that's going to be cut, but I think there's possibly an R&D boost there. In terms of the barriers to building and constructing, in terms of environmental regulation, that is definitely going to be rolled back. Negative for the environment, medium to long term. Positive for the economic activity, shorter term, and for growth. So I think you're going to see that. I think he's going to completely get behind basically anything Musk wants to do to boost the space program. So I also think that's going to give a boost. So I think there's some positives. Some sectors, the space sector, for example, will have boosts. On the minuses, we've talked about migration, we've talked about tariffs, and then there are the big, potentially unfunded tax cuts, which will just be inflationary and I think won't be as stimulative as people hope. So that's kind of trying to rate some of the policies and how I think they'll affect the economy. One interesting aspect that they haven't figured out, where I think they're set up for a bit of a showdown, there's a huge juxtaposition between this whole deregulatory agenda and RFK.
Yeah.
Because RFK is huge on food safety, and the only way to get a lot of the gunk that the Americans put in their food, to get that out of the food supply chain, is regulation.
Is he going to be in charge of health? He hasn't been. I have not seen any news that he's been allocated a position.
Well, Trump has said he should be put in charge and be allowed to do whatever he wanted. So whether he'll come good at that or not, as you say, remains to be seen. But if he is there, you're going to see a clash between the deregulatory agenda and then regulation around food and the food supply chain. So there's some interesting showdowns set up. And then, what does it all mean for Europe and European tech? There is a huge concern about the possible trade war. UK will possibly get off lightly, but I think if you're in the automotive industry or heavy machinery, or basically if you're in Germany or maybe even France, I think there are some concerns there.
There's not much trade with the States, there is. There's a lot more trade with Europe. Our trading partner is mainly Europe. Our trading partner is not mainly the States, is it? By quite a margin.
Yeah. So from a UK perspective, our trade intensity with the US is kind of between 10 and 15% of our exports, and where the European Union is kind of around 50%. So yeah. But it's still an important component, and we know our companies sell a lot of things in the US, and people have been discussing, could he put tariffs on software? Could he put tariffs on SaaS? And it's even been discussed whether there will be a sort of a kind of like a Digital Services Act, right, which Europe put in place for some of the US hyperscalers to tax them on revenue. Would the US do something similar for European tech companies? So there are certainly some potential pitfalls here or icebergs on the way. But overall, I think the fact that we'll have more M&A in 2025, I fully expect that. I think will be a massively positive thing for our ecosystem. So I'm moderately optimistic actually here that, like him or not, that we could be in for a pretty good year ahead from a business perspective.
I've read that he's not going to put tariffs on UK goods. And obviously we don't know what happens. He's not even in power. Who knows what's going to be the January reality? And I'm sure we will not be a priority for him. I'm sure there's a whole world of other things before he gets to the UK. But that was quite an interesting read. And it feels like there's not a huge amount of impact he can create directly for us. Now, I'm marking my words as they're falling out of my mouth because I'm sure that's going to be a terrible jinx. But it feels like this could be an opportunity for Europe to get its act together and for European startups, UK startups to look at all of the productivity, efficiency, onshoring, cyber, defense, maybe even going into climate and green, if that then hopefully will become more popular as the Americans pull out even further. It feels like, and I know that this is opportunistic and happy ears VC talking, but it feels like there's in this world of change and destruction and unrest, it feels like there's going to be a lot of opportunity for startups to do some very cool things. And also, and I know I mentioned this last week, but we've got to remember that this year we're on track in the UK to raise more into venture capital than we ever have historically. So this is an amazing thing. So the money hopefully is coming through. Hopefully some of the opportunities are coming through. But anything more on the Trump piece before we call it a day?
No, I mean, look, we're looking at all the appointments now. There are some not terribly savory figures in the mix.
What a surprise!
Listen, if one is super, super sensitive to unpleasant talk, you probably should, go and hide in a cupboard for the next 4 years because there's going to be a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I think if you can be a little more thick-skinned, I actually think there are a lot of business opportunities in this. And I would just encourage the companies we work with to be really smart, really opportunistic, and take the possibilities that I think will come up in the coming year.
What a lovely, positive way to end, my dear. I'll catch you next week. All the loves.
See you on the flip side.